Thank you so much for coming out. We really are glad to have you here. My name is Kristen Fox. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Before that, I was the Social Studies Supervisor for a really long time. So I've been in the district for a long time. We partnered this year with staff throughout the district to start a Parent Academy. And this is the third of 3. And I just wanted to sort of welcome you to tonight's conversation by telling you what we've been trying to do this year. We had a talk. Our first talk was about healthy stress, youth stress. Our second talk was about effective learning strategies. And tonight we want to talk to you about finding the right college, the college fit, or debunking the college myth. And it is our sincere goal to engage in conversation with you about the issues that we're all dealing with. We deal with them at school, as administrators, counselors, teachers, principals, working with your children, and you're dealing with them at home. And we just want to dialogue with you around these issues that we all care about and try to partner, solve problems together. So that was the spirit behind the Parent Academy. We hope to continue it next year.
My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm the Director of School Counseling here at Ridge High School and in the district. So as Ms. Fox said, the topic for tonight is called Debunking the College Myth. And once we actually start the panel, we'll debunk the title itself and really what that means and what we're referring to when we say the myth itself. But before we begin, I do want to share a source of many of our prompts and certainly the conversation for tonight, which is this book. It's called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, The Antidote to the College Admissions Mania by Frank Bruni. So within the circles of school counseling and college admissions, this book is referred to. It's commonplace talk with professionals in the field, and so it's a recommended read for any of you here. And again, it's certainly where we're pulling a lot of the content and what drives the conversation tonight. So we do just want to be upfront that a lot of what we say will be obviously the words of the panelists themselves, but a lot of it will be from the book as well.
My name is Drew Krause. I'm the principal here at the high school. Let me welcome you to the high school, obviously. And thank you for coming out. It's nice to see all you folks here tonight. Ms. Fox and Ms. Smith and I have worked to try to put these programs together for the community, and we want to welcome you here for that. You know, this is finishing up my second year here at Ridge, and I can tell you, with respect to the topic here tonight, this is a very competitive school, competitive environment, and you know, sometimes I see students who suffer, experience extreme disappointment because they didn't get into the school they wanted to get into, the Ivy League school, let's say. And from my standpoint, where I come from, I always tell them, look, that doesn't mean you're not going to be extremely successful in life. It's what you do with it, And again, I'm a firm believer in it's, not what you know, it's who you know, and connections and contacts out there are extremely important. And I think some of our panelists will probably hit on some of those subjects as well. But I've seen some of that stuff, and we send kids here from all different schools, and they're extremely successful. And I always ask them to come back, which is great because the first class I dealt with was the class last year of 2018, and they've come back, and it's been great speaking to them. They're not necessarily at the elite of elite schools, and they're going to be highly successful in their endeavors, in whatever they choose to do, because they're motivated. They're motivated kids, and they're going to be successful. So I think it's part of the conversation here tonight. It's what you do with what you have, not necessarily where you go. So let me welcome you here tonight. I know Ms. Smith is going to do some introductions of our panelists, and we're happy to have them taking their time out this evening. Some are alums of this school, which is great. They can give you that perspective. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Smith.
Thank you. So we were intentional tonight to really create a panel of diverse representation within our bigger school community. So we want community members, we want Ridge alum, we want professionals in the field of college admissions, coming from NYU and from Rutgers. We want professional school counselors working directly with the kids here at Ridge on a daily basis. And so that's what's really been the driving force behind the panel itself. So if you're familiar with the standard or typical admissions panel, it's usually a host of admissions officers from various colleges. So we really were intentional with that and wanted to provide the community and the parent perspective as well. So with no further ado, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
In the spirit of
I don't think
They're not on.
Yeah, I don't think we need that, so.
change my voice. I use my classroom voice. My name is Jen Mayfield. I live in Basking Ridge. I've lived here since 2003. I'm here in several capacities. I'm the social studies supervisor. There was a big hole until Mrs. Fox became assistant superintendent. And before that, I was the classroom teacher here at Ridge for 12 years. I've worked with students at every level of academic inclination and ability. For most of the past 10 years, I've worked with a lot of juniors. I've written hundreds of letters of recommendation for students applying to every college you can imagine. I'm also the parent of a freshman in college and a senior here at Ridge. So I have just been through this process. I've been on 24 college visits in the past couple of years. I've watched kids go through the process of the choosing, the applying, the agonizing, the waiting, the deciding, and I have two really happy, healthy, wonderful young women that I'm really proud of. And so just here to share some of all of those different experiences.
Hello, I know some of you. My name is Suzanne Schaefer. I am here representing Rutgers University, but I also am a community member. I have a sophomore here at Ridge High School. I also do a little stint on the Board of Ed, but that's going to probably be the end of the year. I have also, in addition to working at Rutgers, which actually I've only been at Rutgers for this year, but before that I served as an admissions counselor at a number of other smaller select universities and colleges, and I also was a college counselor at 2 independent schools in this area for 14 years. So I've been on both sides of this desk, and I'm happy to be back in admissions. I actually really love speaking to students, and I've really enjoyed my time at Rutgers. I think it's a great institution, and there's a lot of good things about it that I'm happy to share, but that's not what we're doing tonight.
Hi everybody, my name is Christy Matarasso, and I am one of the admissions staff members at New York University. I am the representative for this area, so I visit Ridge High School in the fall to meet with students and talk to them and answer their questions about NYU. I've been at NYU for 15 years now, and prior to that I worked both at Drew University and Monmouth University in admissions there.
My name is Marguerite Cahill. I'm a school counselor here at Ridge High School. I've been here for 12 years. I also happen to be a parent of 2 children who are in our school district. So I have a 7th grader at Lambs and I have a 4th grader at Cedar Hill. So I guess since I've been here for this long, and I've had about 60 seniors a year, for about 10 years of doing the senior process. So that's about 600 kids that I've watched go through the college process in the time that I've been here. I also have had a sort of circuitous path to get to being a school counselor, which I talk about a lot with my students. I was a criminal defense attorney before I became a school counselor. So I often tell my students that I made the decision one day to walk in and quit my job, and with nothing planned for the next day, which was a little frightening. And being a person that likes to have my ducks in a row, any of my students will tell you that my office is usually impeccably organized, and I can't stand clutter. And so the idea that I would quit my job with no idea what I was going to do the next day is definitely not what I would describe myself as normally. But I really love it here, and I love what I do, and I find that it's really easy for me to utilize my own experience to talk to students about the scariness of knowing or not knowing what you want to do, but kind of knowing what you like, not really being sure how you can use that, like how do I do what I want to do and like what I do and like use my skill set that I have. And I think that to normalize that for them and to say that there are many things that you can probably do with the things that you're good at and the things that you love, and you don't have to know that right this second. And you might not even know that when you graduate from college, and you might go to graduate school. Heck, you might go to law school and then So I think the ability to do that and to normalize that for them as a teenager, to be like, listen, I'm not sure I have it together and I'm 40, so chill out, you'll be fine, is important. And I really try to use that, and I try to understand and empathize not only with my students but with parents, since I do have a child who is approaching the age where college is becoming the topic of conversation, and she has already told me that it is the topic of conversation at WAMS. So this is something that is really being talked about really early on, and I think that it's important that you're here. I appreciate that you've come out tonight to hear what we have to say and to maybe start changing the mindset not only for your children but also within the community, so that we can have happy, healthy students who are striving for the things that they love rather than maybe this preconceived notion of what they should do.
I'm watching my husband and my children walk in. My name, yeah, just in
I
time.
also coach lacrosse.
Yeah. My name is Michelle Robertson. I'm the other half of this handsome gentleman walking in right now. I hope to give you, so first of all, I've lived in this town since 1976. Do the math. I've lived here my entire life. My parents still live here. I hope to give you guys the perspective of somebody who actually chose the wrong college and had a really tough time in the first college I chose and ended up switching gears, starting over, going to another college, and now I'm the Vice President, General Counsel of Commercial Operations at my company. I'm one of the few women on my leadership team. My company makes billions of dollars. And I am the person that took a lot of failures and turned it into a lot of success. My husband will echo. We've had some struggles. We've made mistakes. We've kind of chosen the wrong path for ourselves, but we've gotten ourselves back on track and done quite well. So I hope to give you that perspective today that nothing's final. You pick up and you move on and you make changes and you get to where you need to be, and every kid will find the where they need to be that's right for them. And that's the God's honest truth.
Hi, I'm Mike Robertson. I am the county prosecutor for Somerset. I too grew up in town, not as long as my wife, but for most of my life. I went to Whams and Ridge. And so I was here on an unrelated matter talking to kids about what we're seeing with heroin and drugs and all that stuff. And Stephanie asked me to come to talk about my experiences leaving Ridge, going to Penn State undergrad. And I kind of want to also talk to you, because Michelle and I are both parents and we're not in the shoes you are, although I'm sure Lincoln will be there, but I kind of want to talk to you about, as an attorney, and before this job I was a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, what I look for in terms of when I'm hiring. Michelle can likewise probably tell you that as well. And so we're hiring folks that are attorneys, Juris Doctorate degrees, advanced degrees, and I will tell you by and large, the bulk of who I've hired, and when Chris Christie was my boss's U.S. attorney, they were Rutgers and Seton Hall Law School and undergrad folks. Yes, that we have our dabble with Princeton and Columbia and all that, but the bread and butter, and I'll share stories with you from the federal judges too, that they want people that got grit. And I'm just here to tell you, and I'll share whatever you want or ask whatever you want, but I've seen more people get fired that went to Ivy League schools than I've seen get hired. And so,
And that's not to say it's a bad thing.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm blessed to have my kids do that, but again, I'll share with you some things that I look for and a lot of my counterparts do. Again, when the governor was hiring, what we look for in hiring young people, whether it's at a college or law school. And maybe it will be eye-opening, maybe it won't. Maybe I'll tell you something you already know. But I'm here. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for our panelists for giving your time for this conversation. As a few of you have already mentioned, we really are intended on having a different conversation. So it's not a conversation about how to get in and what exact criteria you need to meet for entry into highly selective and prestigious institutions. It's really taking a bit of a risk and having a courageous conversation in this highly professional, highly driven, and high-achieving community that we're all in. And we know that our kids, and we experience those of us who are on staff and work with the kids daily at no matter what level, really we know that it's a high-pressure environment. And so to have this conversation, we welcome you and we thank you for really just taking the step to be here. For this evening, please feel free to raise your hand at any time and ask the panelists anything that you would like. They are here, so we'll engage in that type of communication back and forth. As much dialogue with one another is exactly what we welcome here tonight. So to grease the wheels a bit and to kick things off, I do think it's important, like I mentioned earlier, to hone in on the title of this evening's event, right? So we call it the Debunking the College Myth. And so what is the college myth? Is there a singular myth that's out there that we should be aware of, or are there many myths as we go along? So I'll refer to the source of the conversation, like I mentioned earlier. It reads you a passage, and I'll ask the panelists just to reflect on what it means to you and what some myths are that you'd like to address this evening. In this text, the author believes that there are myths out there for students engaging in the college admissions process, that there are only about 10 worthy colleges in America, and that this is probably the most important decision of your child's life, and that if you don't get the ticket to Harvard, then your gravy train is doomed. So what does that mean to you as a panelist and with your perspective?
Well, I'll go, because I kind of think I said it. I left Ridge as a pretty big soccer star here. I mean, that was my focus. Yeah, I was probably the original Toby. I like to think of myself that way. But that was my focus. And I remember my dad saying to me, Michelle, you're not going to be a professional soccer player. And I was like, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. Which I'm sure, I'm certain that your kids probably say something to that effect in some sort of subject matter. And I got a scholarship to the University of Massachusetts for soccer. And I went, and I knew the moment that my parents dropped me off that it was the wrong choice for me. It was, I remember being like, oh my God, this doesn't feel right. And you know, my parents had told me that. And I stayed, and I actually had a pretty miserable time. And I didn't play soccer after my first year. I was dating a guy that was a total jerk. And I left, and I remember my grades were so bad. I was a D student there. That was foreign. I mean, I come from a really high-functioning family, and I had probably a 2.0 or less. And I remember my brother called Rutgers, and we talked to a dean there, and they said, she's not going to get in here. And they said, please take her as non-matriculating. I went to Rutgers, non-matriculating for a semester. I got my act together, and I ended up getting in. But point to that statement is, that is so false. I mean, I was at my lowest point, and I will look at all of you parents, and I'll tell you, I would never trade one moment of that experience. Because Mike said it best, it gave me grit. And it made me see that, okay, I'm gonna be at a low point, and that's not the only time I've been at a low point, but I knew that I could kind of pick myself up and keep going and shift. And my parents always pushed. They never shoved, but they pushed. And it was kind of a healthy thing. They said, okay, you're at a tough time, but you're gonna be at a tough time, and that's life. And again, you know, just back to the quote, it's just, I'm the Vice President, General Counsel of Commercial Operations. It's a big job. And if I think back, I never would have thought that, but I didn't make the right decision to go to the college I went to, but here I am. I'm doing okay. And it's okay to make a wrong decision. That's life. That's where you learn.
The perspective I share with my students is that I bought into that so wholeheartedly that I was so paralyzed as a senior in high school. My parents sat me down and made me fill out, like, you know, because I'm old enough that it was paper applications. And my parents sat me down and made me fill them out by hand. And then when my parents were divorced, my dad left and my mom walked away, and I hid them under my bed and I never mailed them. And I didn't actually apply to college as a senior in high school because I was so afraid that of any choice, because I was so convinced that that was true. And the belief that that decision was going to make or break the entirety of the rest of my life paralyzed me. And so then I ended up going to Ramapo. They had rolling admissions. I did really badly also. I don't tell my students until about 3/4 of the way through the year in the classes I ended up teaching. And then I went to Union County College to bring my grades up, and then I applied to Rutgers. And I'm so excited that I am a very proud holder of 2 degrees from Rutgers. And you know, when I apply for a job, I just say, if I graduated from Rutgers. Yep. And then I went very happily into a career in pharmaceutical marketing, and then I learned what pharmaceutical marketing was. And then I left that after 10 years of making a lot of money and not filling my soul. And so I learned when I became a teacher what soul-filling work felt like. And so my guiding principle with all of my students, don't buy that myth. Follow your heart, follow your passions, follow your interests. Allow them to guide you. Allow yourself to be led as opposed to dictated to. The belief that the decisions you make, that anything that happens today is going to make or break this future. So it can be paralyzing. So help your children avoid falling into that.
So, I mean, I shared a little bit about the fact that I guess in some ways, Jen and I have similar stories that, you know, I left the career that I thought I wanted. My path into college was interesting. My parents both went to Gettysburg. They met at Gettysburg. So, and there's apparently this whole thing about people who go to Gettysburg and they meet at Gettysburg and their children go to Gettysburg and they do the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, not talking to me. So we went to go visit Gettysburg. I'm like, that's cute. Where are we going next? Like, I don't want to go there. So my parents were really disappointed. And then we went to another school. I won't even say the name of it. And I wouldn't get out of the car. My dad's like, this is going to be really tough. Like, I would just like go on a few trips, like enjoy this process. I was not easy about the college admissions process. I'm actually not easy about most things in life, but I was not easy about that. And when it came time to actually apply to colleges, I did what my parents' worst nightmare was, and I applied to the college that my boyfriend was going to. Early decision. By forging my parents' signature. So, and I say that not normally to any of my students, so if you're in the room, just earmuffs, you're not listening. But I married him, so I think it worked out. But the bottom line is my parents were horrified. They were horrified that I was following someone else to college. They didn't think it was the right place for me. It was a state school, and they were like, what? We would have sent you to Gettysburg. Like, why do you want to go to, like, Trenton State Teachers College? I'm like, okay, it hasn't been called that since, like, I don't know, 1960. So, like, that's not what it's called. They were really not thrilled about my decision. And that is not to say that I didn't have supportive parents, because that's actually not accurate. I think that they were so worried that I was going to make the wrong decision or do some, like life-altering thing to myself at 17 years old that I wasn't going to be able to fix. And then, you know, I had a great 4 years. I had an amazing undergrad experience there. And I think that for me, it was really the right fit. And I think it was for multiple reasons. I think I knew that if I had gone someplace else, I would have driven there anyway to see my boyfriend, not have my own college experience. But ironically, I was able to have my own college experience there, and we, were able to operate in the same circle and yet still have our separate lives. And I had a great 4 years, and it allowed me to kind of have the trajectory that I had later, and I feel like I wouldn't have had the same experience had I gone to some place just because it seemed like the best place to go, or it was the hardest place that I could have gotten into. I remember my parents saying to me, but you could go someplace else, like you have got really good grades. Right, and I could go there with really good grades. And I think that is something that I hear a lot echoed through my students and echoed really in the families that come into my office. It is not unusual for someone to walk into my office, take one look at the diplomas hanging on my wall and say, you're a lawyer, what are you doing here? I don't know, hopefully helping your kids to get where they want to go. So, the scary thing is the idea that that's more prestigious or that that's better. I find myself wanting to defend my decision. And I have some people that I have been working with recently, some seniors on my caseload that I think are going through similar situations where they're making changes in their lives or they're reprioritizing things, and they feel like they need to defend why they want to choose this over that. Like, why do you want to prioritize art over science? Or why do you want to do this particular major instead of like playing your sport at a Division I school? Like, why are you doing that? And I think the idea behind remembering that if they're brave enough to make that type of decision right now, I think we really have to like embrace that and foster those choices, because they're not easy ones to make, and it doesn't mean that they won't change their mind. And you know, that it's your job to be there and say, like, you know, good for you for going for what you want. And then if they change their mind, like, you know what, good for you for being willing to know that that wasn't the right fit for you. Rather than that panicked response of like, well, I mean, if you do that, you're gonna spend another year, or like, what if you, I think that that in and of itself paints that message that there's some right path for you, a right decision. And in my own experience and in the experience of watching, you know, somewhere around 600 kids do this, I don't feel like there's not the one right school, there's not the one right path. The whole reason you have a list of schools is that you should want to go to any of the ones on your list, not one particular place. And that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around as a teenager, and I think it's hard, you know, even sometimes as parents, to remember that there is not one school for your child.
So I just wanted to add something to that, because right what you said, I have 5 children, and I just kind of wanted to mention the difference between, you know, you guys represent the differences that we see in all of our kids, and my 5 represent those as well. From 29 to 16, sophomore, and my senior is not going to college next fall. And as, you know, in the position I'm in, I will tell you that's not been an easy process for me this year, to step back and let him do that. Now I say that, he's going to go to community college, most likely, but that application is not filled out yet. It is not submitted. He's going to take a class this summer in Ireland, which is awesome, but the difficulty has been letting him choose his path and be okay with it when everybody else is sort of talking about what they're doing. And just, you know, in comparison to the other 4, it's just, they're all very different. And so letting him do that has been, you know, sort of a growth experience for me as well. And I think it's a really important thing for us to remember that everybody here is different, all of these students are different, all of your children are different, and it is really about that right path.
I think the question too, you have to ask your kids and yourself is, what do you define as success, right? I think the immediate reaction is money, right? It's no secret we live in one of the wealthiest towns in Somerset County, let alone the United States. So that's probably a focus, right? Like success is making lots of money. I can tell you that Michelle and I went to high school, I won't say their names, but we're friends with families that built some of these $1.7, $2 million homes in this town. And he doesn't have a college degree. And he's a very, very wealthy man. I have friends that graduated that are, you know, electricians and plumbers. They're driving around in Cadillac Escalades. Those are $90,000 to $100,000 trucks.
No student loan debt.
So, yes, 0 debt. So the question that, you know, I would ask my kids is like, what do you define success? Like, you're a lawyer, you have a law degree, but you find your career rewarding in helping students. Okay, great. The one piece of advice I would give you, and I'm sure my wife would echo this because she experienced it, is wherever your kids, whatever they're identifying as the ones they want to go to, and if they do get in, go visit them. Like I got into Penn State, I didn't get into main campus coming out of Ridge. I believe it's still pretty difficult to get into Penn State main campus, but I went to Hazleton, visited it, I told my father there was no way I'm going there. And so the guidance folks at Penn State were like, well, Altoona has openings, and it's the 2nd largest campus next to State College. It has about 4,000 or 5,000 kids at that time. This is 1996. And I thought that was an awesome segue for me because it had the 4,000, 5,000 kid population, so I had the college feel. But it wasn't State College, which I believe currently was about 50,000. And I have friends that went here that got into State College, and some of them failed out. And the reason being, it was so overwhelming. You know, the fraternity, the social scene was so overwhelming to them that they couldn't balance their social life and their academic, and they failed out. Some of them went back and got their stuff in order. But I had this great experience where I'm like, all right, this is fun, this is college. I have the right social balance with academics. And then I ultimately transferred up to State College.
And you got the same degree?
And I got the same degree. And so, you know, I always say I had the best, I kind of had a small college and then the big college. And so that worked for me. But I would encourage, I am with, she's only 10 back there standing up, but I'm going to take her and her brother and say, like, where do you guys want to go? Where do you want to stay? And make sure it's the right fit. If it's a big school, like Penn State or Michigan or whatever, great. If it's a small school, that's fine too. It's individual is the decision.
Can we ask questions? Okay, I have a question about, do you guys at Ridge help them understand that whole thing? Because I think that's so important. Because right, in the US, we think success is making $1 zillion and not going to college. Right? Everybody
make a
wants
lot of
to do
people
the
rich.
jobs and like that's success. But then I have other friends who think, no, it's family pride and my son is going to be a doctor whether he makes money or not. But so, you know, do you guys help with that a little bit? I know you have a ton of kids, but do you talk about that whole thing?
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of want to answer that as a, as the counselor here. Yes, we do help with that. I think what you just presented though is such a conflict sometimes for these kids. Like if I'm saying to them, you need to decide what your own definition of success is, because I think Mike's point is extremely well taken, and I can't tell you how many times a week I actually say that. If what's being driven home for them in a lot of other environments is contrary to that, it's really hard. Like you're like fighting up against like all these other mixed messages that they're getting. But I mean, one of the good things about them is they actually don't listen to their parents as much as they listen to other adults in their life, right? So I have a fighting chance that they actually hear something that I say. But yeah, do we help them? Definitely. I mean, I think that what's really important to understand about what we do at Ridge is that we are very hands-on. As much as I have somewhere just under 240 kids on my caseload, I know them, I know their names, I know things about them. How much I know about them differs because it's their choice whether or not they really want to connect with me and to talk with me and to tell me things about themselves. And so that does differ between my students. Sometimes it takes me until their senior year to really feel like I've really gotten to know them. But we start, we meet with them in 8th grade when they do their 8th grade scheduling meetings. So they are meeting with a Ridge High School counselor. So we really try to be accessible from like nearly day one, sort of before day one. We see them throughout their time at Ridge High School. We try to ascertain from them, what do they want? And I don't just mean like, what do they want in terms of college study? I mean like, we're talking about your schedule for next year. Like, well, what do you want to do? Like, I understand your parents want you to take honors this, or that you think if you want to be a doctor, you should take honors that. But like, what do you like? What are you good at? What do you want to do? And sometimes it is helping them communicate and advocate for themselves to the other important players in their life. Like, I need this. This is important to me. I really want to do this. I've had kids switch gears, and I've had them be willing to have those tough conversations. And then I've had other kids that are terrified to do that. And it's sad for me because I feel like, first of all, sometimes they're terrified to even have the conversation with me. And then, being able to advocate on their own is hard. Like that is something that they are learning how to do, right? Like high school is a period of time where they're differentiating themselves from their family, right? So it's normal that they don't want to hang out with you as much and they don't want to tell you things. And that is part of the developmental process. And that's okay. The problem is when they're not telling anybody anything. And they're talking to their peers, and their peers are all talking about honors and AP courses and how like this is what you need to do to succeed. And they believe that because they're surrounded by it all the time. So I think the important thing and what you can do as parents is to try to foster that relationship with a trusted adult at school. And whether that is their counselor, which I would be like, yes, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a teacher that they really look up to. My daughter's at WAMS. Her favorite people at the moment are some of her teachers, and some of them ones that she had in 6th grade, and she's in 7th grade now. So her go-to person is not necessarily the one that I pick for her, it's the one that she picks for herself. But knowing who those people are, and maybe being able to give them the down low, I'm like, hey, listen, like this is what's going on at home, just so that you know, because they don't always say, what they're doing at home or what they're presenting like at home, and then to be able to get that information, like I feel like it takes a village as both a parent and a counselor. If I didn't have the ability to reach out to someone else and be like, well, what do you think of this? How can you help me with that? Or how can we work together? The idea is to kind of work together as a team to get them through. So we meet with them in 8th grade, we schedule them each year. We are meeting with them sophomore year to talk about career planning with the idea of not being like, let's choose your career right now. What's out there? What are you good at? What do you like? What kind of skills do you have, and how does that lend itself to a particular career area? I mean, there are careers that we don't even know will exist when they graduate from college. Like there are majors that every year a kid comes in and tells me about a major that I'm like, what is that? Like that's cool. Like tell me about what you do. So I think that just the idea of like, what is your skill set, what do you like to do? So we do that a lot during sophomore year. Junior year, we're starting that focus on like, let's talk about what life is gonna look like after high school. And it doesn't have to be college. Like even the eye-opening conversation of like, so like, what do you wanna do after high school? And a lot of them are like, duh, I'm gonna go to college. Like, right, of course, everybody knows that. But it doesn't have to be that. And so even like having the okay conversation about like, okay, I mean, you can do that, but it doesn't have to be your path. What do you like to do? What are you good at? We do a lot of that during junior year. We try to be really student-driven and student-focused. So some kids are ready for that. Like it's like the end of freshman year, and they want to talk about like what colleges can I get into with the scores I have right now. And you're like, right now? I mean, I don't even know if you have a GPA yet. But then we have other kids that it's like the end of junior year, and they're like scared about this. Like as Jen mentioned before, like this is a topic that is terrifying. You got to work at their pace. You cannot force somebody to be ready to talk about what they want to do. And I think hopefully what we're able to do is tell them like, you can come back to us whenever. You can come back to us at the start of senior year, the middle of senior year. I had my secretary, it's like a running joke. She's like, when do they stop being your students? I'm like, when I'm dead? I mean, if they're like, 4 years out and they want to talk about something, like, yes, come back. Let's have a conversation. I'd love to know what you're doing. It is how I think I'm able to work with younger kids that I have conversations with 22, 23, 25, 28-year-olds about what they're doing now and what their process looks like, and maybe getting a better idea of how I can help them to bridge that gap between where they are right now and how they're going to get to that point. So that's a really long-winded answer to your question, but yes, we do.
Question over here?
Can I ask, as a corporate body, as the school, my son came home and said there was a college shirt day, and I thought, well, if you were going to be a pilot and you weren't going to college, well, how does a child navigate a day at school like that? Or even like your son who's making a choice, which is a brave choice, which suits him. But how does he navigate a day when everybody's walking around school? It so happened he was wearing a shirt that had water carded, and so he felt like somebody looked at him. I mean, how do those children navigate those who have made choices which may not be choices? And as you say, the world is it's not necessarily, college is not the magic bullet necessarily. How do you, and I've heard some high schools where they will, as the children are graduating, they announce which college they're attending, and I found that to be a difficult paradigm for me to navigate, because if you did choose the local community college, how does that, how are we helping them to be brave enough to make the alternative choices if we're messaging college?
So I want with the senior at Ridge the night
You
before.
couldn't hear the question? So it's a really good question, and she's basically talking, you mentioned the conflict, right? There's competing and conflicting things coming at the kids, and one of them is even in school when we have things like wear your favorite college sweatshirt day. And what does that do for a kid who's thinking about community or travel or the military? So it's kind of like, how does a student navigate the world, which is telling them that college is really the only way?
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's May 1st that we do that, which is the day that seniors have to make, if they're going to college, they have to make a commitment by May 1st to say where it is that they're going. So the idea is that on that day, people are like proudly sporting, what am I doing
They're proud.
next year? So just to,
And they're proud, so.
But I have a senior at Ridge who was very excited to be able to wear her shirt that day, but told me the night before about several of her friends who weren't coming to school. And I thought, oh, how do we
Be
proud of saying, you know what, I'm going to spend a year getting the same college English 101 that I'm going to get for $30,000, for $3,000. How do we make them proud of that choice? How do we make them proud of the choice to say, I'm not ready yet, and I know I'm not ready yet. And the things I think I want to do, I know require practical experience, so I'm going to go work for a while. And I think that that's one of the reasons that being part of the team with Kristen and with Drew and with Stephanie and with Marguerite and the members of our community are coming together to start having these conversations about changing that dialogue. And we're all a team. like Marguerite said, to raise a village. I am a committed member of our community, a committed parent, a committed educator. And I share these messages with students and with teachers. When we did this exercise with the social studies teachers, what do we want the goal of the social studies department to be? The answer was a good human being. Right?
We need
A good human being.
Yeah.
You know, and so when your kids come home from school and you say, how was your day? Right? They're probably going to respond with, oh, I had a test, or I did good, or, oh, how did that assignment go? I got this. Don't ask them that. Ask them, what did you learn today? What were you curious about? How did you grow and develop as a human being? Because all they want to do is please us. They want to please the adults in their life. They want to please their parents. They want to please their peers, right? And so how do they get positive feedback? Well, what do we give them positive feedback all the time for? Their grades, right? How'd you do? But if we start giving them feedback for what'd you learn, what were you curious about, how did you satisfy yourself today, what goal did you set, what goal did you meet? Those, when we start to, respond to them in those ways and have those conversations with them, we help them situate within themselves the power over their happiness and their success. And that is the way to start getting them to avoid letting other people put labels on them that make them successful or unsuccessful.
I know there's a hand up, but I just want to piggyback on that because where I used to, as an administrator in a different school district, we had an assembly speaker, and one of his messages was, listen, when you go home, you should talk to your kids and don't start the conversation with, how was your day today? Good. What'd you do? Nothing. He gave me an idea. One of his ideas was to ask your child, who did you help today? And I thought that was great, because they actually have to think about it. And actually, it helped my son actually help people in school. I mean, he came home with a certificate like a month and a half later, sat next to somebody in the cafeteria who was sitting alone. I got all choked up because just from asking that question, well, who have you helped today? It started making me think about that. Sort of what Ms. Rayfield was saying, not how was your day, good, because that's what you're going to get. But when you start having them think in a different way, I started using that tactic, because I want them to grow as people and not just identify with, where are you going to college? I mean, that doesn't mean anything.
Mike and I do that a lot to our kids, and I just did career day at my kid's school at Oak Street, and one of the teachers came up to me and she said, you have two of the kindest kids. And she goes, and I see it all, and you guys are doing great. That meant more to Mike and I than any A they could get. We always say, we just want to raise good, kind human beings. Everything else will fall into place. It just will. Because nobody here has lived a life unscathed. Everybody's made a decision that they're maybe not proud of or the wrong decision for them. And we're all here, and we're all doing okay. So just remember that for your kids, and focus on the important stuff.
I just want to quickly respond to that, because it's interesting. I think the counselors every year find themselves, are in this conundrum of do you like this day, do you not like this day? You're working with somewhere around 60 kids every year, some of whom are so excited about where they're going to go, and they've worked so hard, and they've gotten to maybe where they want to be, or maybe a great alternative to where they initially thought they wanted to be. And then you have other kids who aren't super comfortable yet with where they're headed, or what but I think that what Mike said before about grit, the idea of being it's okay for a kid to come to school and be yikes, I'm not wearing a Yale t-shirt, or yikes, because that's the beginning of what it's like to be all right, I've made certain decisions, and those certain decisions have repercussions, and I've made choices, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to end up at one of the places that are or maybe I never will, and I'll end up in a totally different path that is the right path for me. But I think it's that idea of saying, it's okay that you're doing that, and it's okay that that day might sting a little bit too. Just the same way as you ask somebody at the prom, and they say no, and they go with someone else, and you still go to the prom, and they're ugh, there's parts of this night that are going to really stink, especially if they're at my table. They're just things that I navigate with kids all the time, and I'm oh, that does really stink. That's awful. But the idea of being able to say, it's okay to have a day where you're ouch, that kind of sucked, and I'm really kind of hoping that May 2nd is going to look better than May 1st did.
But the idea of being like, as a parent, to be like, no, like, please don't stay home from school. Like, sport, I don't care what t-shirt you wear a t-shirt that's gonna make you laugh. Something like a cause that you espouse, like something that is important to you. We talked this year in the counseling department about like, should we just all wear Ridge t-shirts? I'm like, where am I going next year? I'm coming right back here. But you know, the idea of being like, it is okay to have gone wherever you've gone and to, you know, go wherever you go, because hopefully the idea is that you are making a choice, and that choice is what's right for you at that particular time. So I really want to, I think I want to push back on that idea of being like, poor them, because I want to be like, no, it's okay. Whatever you're doing is right for you, and even if you don't feel awesome about it right this second, there are kids that go off to the University of Massachusetts that don't feel awesome about it. They've gotten a scholarship to play sports, and they get there and they're like, oh God, like this is not, I'm supposed to love this, and I don't love this. And if you don't start painting the message that like, just because you're not super thrilled about what your choice is, does not mean that you can't change this for yourself, or that you can't have something better by the time that you're ready to get there. So I think that we need to be really careful about being like, we should stop doing that, or we should, like, you've got to be out in the world, and there are going to be disappointments, and that might be one of them. And I run both sides of that fence, because there are parts of me that don't want to wear the college t-shirt, and then there are other parts of me that are like, we got to celebrate the successes we have and work with the kids who might not be in that place right now and help them get to a place where they're happier.
I don't mind that. I mean, you know, I love to study, but I'm just, you know what I'm saying, and we need to celebrate that, but how do we equally support those who made choices which don't follow? You know, so they, I mean, I'm saying, I mean, I didn't even know that happened, but, you know, I'm just saying, it does take a lot of courage to go against the grain.
Yes,
but,
definitely.
You know, like you say, I'm going to go, you know,
This question kind of ties in, and I think it's really more for the university folks that are here. But you talked about how our students sometimes are led by their peers with regard to what classes they schedule. And, you know, I think they feel the need that they can't graduate from Ridge having only CP classes, or if the college doesn't see growth. And, you know, if you're getting A's in CP, well, you should be taking honors, or you should be taking AP if you wanted to get into Rutgers or NYU. So I'm curious to see, and, you know, I don't know if that's a myth that we need to debunk, or, you know, do we have, how is that perspective coming from the university folks when you're seeing a kid who may have a 4.0 with all CP classes from Ridge High School?
You know, one of the things that I was thinking about as some of this was talking about, I appreciate all the people saying, go visit these schools. I think there needs to be a backup to junior year when you're considering what colleges and are on a list. So this is a little bit of a side, but that list, to just put it out there and say, okay, where do you want to go? What are you hearing about? Well, they're hearing about the same places that their friends are talking about, and maybe who just won the NCAA basketball tournament. So it is a very small group of schools that most juniors know about. They really are very myopic. So it's important for us as parents to remind the kids there are 30,000 colleges and universities in this United States, and you will find one that will fit you. It does not have to be Harvard or whatever specific school is placed out there as the epitome of the best. It's really about fit and what's good for you. That said, I also want to say we were talking to some of the Ridge High School students, a group of us from the board for an advocacy thing, and they were talking about how every student feels the need to take honors classes or take AP classes and take more AP classes, and this constant push to do more and better and whatever. And I heard parents say, you know, I just sat through an admission session that the person said, if there are 30 AP courses offered at your school, you better be taking 10. And I thought, okay, completely crazy, because just even trying to figure out 10 AP courses that any one individual student can take is almost unfathomable because of, you know, you can't take all the languages, that kind of thing. If you're not an artist, you're not taking AP art. But when the students hear things, and I think this is one of the problems of being on this panel as an admissions person in some ways, is a lot of the pressure that students hear and feel and parents hear and feel, messages they're getting from admissions people, it comes back to the colleges are driving this. They're amping up the admissions, the anxiety in the classroom. They're making everybody say you have to do more, better, further. And the reality is you should be looking at all these 3,000 schools and figuring out what is a good fit for you. I always like to tell students, think about, try not to be a cookie cutter applicant for a specific school, but figure out who you're becoming and who's going to help you become that. Where do you want to be in 6 years from now, not just in 2 years from now, at what school, and who's going to get you there the best. And
Yeah,
all of that.
Shame on the schools for doing that. Shame on them.
For doing what?
Amping up. That is so wrong. The college admission scandal. Ugh. This thing that you just said trickles to our children. It's wrong. Shame on them. And shame on letting the college admission scandal go forward. Like, our kids have to live in that.
Right.
And everything you guys are saying is great, but the schizophrenia out there, and you just said it and then you just dismissed it. That's the list they're handing our kids. You take those APs. That CPA is worth nothing if it's not an AP. And we live in this town and it drives me nuts. And I can tell you people are leaving this town. They don't want their kids in this kind of environment. This is a negative. I want my kid to be rich and not go to college. I don't want the pressure that they're putting on them because the colleges are saying that. Like, I love that you can tell us as directors you're not looking for that, but that list.
And I'm not going to tell you that we're not looking at that. I mean, actually, the one thing about Rutgers, and I've got some of my stuff because I wanted to bring it, and I've worked at other places, and Christy and I can talk about this, but we're very transparent in terms of, like, literally on the brochure has a list of every school that students can apply to as an undergrad, the average SAT is mid 50%, and the GPA that's mid 50%. So we publish this information. Now, does that mean that, the GPA for arts and sciences says that it's between a 3.6 and a 4.1? What does that mean to a Ridge student? So when I talk to students in a group, now we're here at Ridge tonight, so we can talk to you as knowing that most of you have students in this district, all of you probably. When you're in a big group of students and you're standing in front of 250 students who have come to campus, you don't know who's in the audience. And I think it's a very important piece to take away as a parent in that when an admissions person is saying, look, we'd like you to take AP and honors classes, I may be talking to that student who's at Patterson High School, and they darn well better be taking honors and AP courses because that's the classes that are college prep there. But a student from Ridge internalizes that and says, yikes, I'm supposed to be doing all this and I've got to do more and I'm never going to get in. So some of this is getting through the clutter and the conversations. And some of it does come back to some conversations that admissions people, I think have that are not necessarily, understanding of where students are coming from. I mean, we were both 22-year-old admissions counselors at one point. Had no idea what we were, except the schools that we were working for. Now that we were in the process, it's a totally different thing.
Well, and to the point that's been made, I mean, there are college representatives who will say to you, we really do want to see you challenging yourself as much as possible in the context of what's offered at your school. You should be doing well, because to get into those schools, that's the truth, right? But as Suzanne just said it, and as I was thinking about comments that I was going to make, your point about how there are over 3,000 colleges and universities in this country, that very thought had run through my mind. And so I think what we all need to do is remind students that there are over 3,000 colleges and universities in this country and work together to help them not be so myopic and so focused on the 30 or so. My husband actually is a school counselor, so we talk a lot about the college admissions process, and he says it too, that he is constantly trying to get students to think beyond name schools. Parents and students will come into his office and they'll have a list of colleges and universities that are on this list. Sometimes it's extremely unrealistic with the academics that he knows
they have and what that college or university expects. Sometimes there's really no rhyme or reason to the schools that are on that list, and so, you know, he tries to get students to think about, let's put names aside for a minute. What qualities are you looking for in a college? Big school, small school, location, major, whatever those things are. And, you know, I think a lot of school counselors do this too, to try and say, okay, well, you have this particular name brand school on your list, and you talked about these qualities. Think about these other schools that you might not have heard of or might not have thought of. Because it really is just a fact that there are some highly, highly selective schools that do want to see A's in AP classes.
That's right.
Right?
And
there are.
And it's not a bad thing. It is what it is. The point is that should all of our students be saying, well, that's the only school that's out there?
Exactly.
Luckily, it's not. If it was, then we should be having all of our students take APs and honors classes. But if they're not ready for that, then there are a whole slew of amazing places, you know, not where you go, it's who you'll be, you know, that are going to really transform those kids. And not everyone is cut out for the 35,000 students at Rutgers, and maybe a much better fit would be TCNJ, and that's awesome. But maybe it's also a small private liberal arts college that not everybody is talking about, which could be even more selective than us, or less. There are so many choices that the problem is the students take it and say, well, these are only the 20 places that everybody's talking about, and therefore I need to take the classes to get into, have the GPA to get into those places. And what we need to do is open up that dialogue about more choices.
I think, by the way, that's part of our job as parents,
Yes.
right?
I would agree.
Like, I'm not going to digress, but I go to a lot of schools about a lot of topics, drugs, alcohol, this, that, suicide. Like, all this stuff starts at home. So maybe I'm being a little bit too candid with people in this room, but like, if you set the tone in your house about what's acceptable, what's successful, then they're going to follow. And if the idea is to debunk this, then shut the noise off for them. Because I remember being 15, 16, 17. I thought I knew everything. I was a moron, you know? I was. And like, thank God I had a father and a mother who, my dad was military background and then a Secret Service agent. So like, he shut all that noise off for me. He was my father. And so, that's what I'm going to do, we are going to do with our kids, is like turn that noise off for them, because that's what we're supposed to do. Say, hey, we've been here, Will and Ashlyn, like, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. You're going to land on your feet. Look at your mom, look at your dad. We weren't rock stars. We did good, we did well, and look at us now, So I hear what you're saying. I'm not there yet. I know I will be soon. But I'm going to be honest with you, I think that's our job as parents, to like turn that noise off for them.
I think school has a very big part to play, and I agree with, I just want to touch on your comment, right? Anybody who hasn't read that book should. If you don't understand how US News does the ratings and rankings, you should. You will realize what you're chasing. There's some prestige associated with a few names, but please read that book and read that video. And I have to say that school has a larger part to play. Parents, yes, but they are in this situation longer than they are at home. So school has an absolutely incredibly large role. We can't change universities. It's a money-making business. We all know that. Let's not worry about that. Let's do what we can do. And maybe one of the things start small is to change the day we are talking about. Let's acknowledge that it's overhyped. We don't need to display that on the t-shirts. Let's start small, but let's start somewhere. We can't fix the universities. We can't change admissions, what they are saying. That's a business. Right? We start at home, we start at school, and let's take baby steps together.
Yeah, I think to address your point though, and to back up what Mike is saying, I can't tell you how many conversations I have with kids where I say things like, I think you're awesome, and I think you have so many great choices, and all they can hear is, I just told you that you might not get into Columbia. And the problem is that when you say this is, it has to happen at school because they spend the majority of their day here, they do, but their value system isn't formed at
It's
school.
a collective thing. It's a collective effort.
It is, but I want to really push back on the idea that I can impact their value system, because trust me, I try, I really do. And I'm actually pushy, and I don't get any place with that
Change is
sometimes.
going to be hard, but that's exactly why we're here, right? And we're going to have to start small, and we're going to have to
I
spread
do
that.
think it starts at the younger grades as well, like you're seeing them in high school. And I would point out, I don't know how many of you have kids in the elementary. Show of hands, how many have elementary children?
Not here, but.
because I was suspecting we were mostly high school. Most of the elementary schools are putting a big emphasis on what we call the growth mindset. Have you heard of the growth mindset? Does that come from at all? And so it's plastered over some of the walls, and they're really trying to talk to the kids about celebrating growth as much or more than achievement. So you grew this much, it's a celebration. It's not the A, or it's not the performance on a single test or trying to get into a certain course. So that is starting at the younger grades, and I think that's part of what you're talking about, that it has to kind of come from like every facet of their life, not just when they get to the college search process.
And we talk a lot in our offices. NYU is a big university. We also have a pretty big admissions office. There's about 30 of us. And I love telling students and families just about the diversity of the educational backgrounds of my colleagues. We have some NYU alumni, some people like myself who went to small liberal arts colleges who admit the vast majority of their applicants. One of my colleagues went to a small liberal arts college in the South, but he took several years off after high school, just wasn't ready to go to college, ended up going to a competitive institution, but not until he was in his late 20s. We do have people who have transferred from community colleges and then gone on to four-year schools. Our former vice president for enrollment management started at a community college when he was about 30, and then went on to a four-year school and then eventually earned his doctorate. So, and we all are NYU admissions counselors, right? One of my former colleagues went to arguably one of the best independent schools in the country, and then went to Harvard and worked, 10 feet away from me. I'm a Drew University alum, and I don't know what their admit rate when I started there in the mid-90s, but it was certainly the majority of their applicants that they were taking. And so we all ended up in the same place in Greenwich Village.
What I'm hearing from a lot of people is, and I'm sort of seeing the reflection in the parent. I love talking with parents and love talking with parents about their children and their children's experiences. And I love talking with parents about the conversations I've had with children here at Ridge over the years in terms of the kinds of things that you're talking about. So Frank Bruni, as you know, is a New York Times columnist. His work is regularly in the New York Times, and his colleague is David Brooks. And David Brooks wrote a book a few years ago called The Road to Character. And Marguerite is currently the faculty advisor at the Ethics Club, which I was at one point as well. And very often the conversations that we had in Ethics Club were about topics the kids wanted to talk about, and this was a big thing. How do I navigate this? How do I be true to myself, given all of the noise I hear from either my parents or my peers or my social media feeds or whatever. I don't know if that was the right word, social media feeds. But so we had this conversation about, David Brooks talks about resume virtues versus eulogy virtues. And what are the difference? And what's a resume virtue? And that's what these kids are working on, because all they hear is what they hear. I'm not saying this is what we say. What they hear is, do this because it looks good on your transcript. Do this because it looks good on your transcript. And I don't want to speak for our college admissions people, but the message that I heard on the 24 college visits I've been on over the past 18 months is, we want you to take advantage of the things that your high school has to offer, but we would really like you to be the most authentic version of yourselves. Jen, I'm sorry. You know what, Jen? It's bullshit to me, because if that's the way they feel about children, then I don't want you to go.
I mean, that's your authentic self, really.
Can I ask you a question?
I wanted to ask from the Rice, from the college admission, so do they really have to go and make a fancy resume? Like, I don't know about the process, so
No.
my job is just like...
No, it's not a fancy resume at all. So we guide them through that process. We show them samples of what a resume should look like for a student, because a student resume is not an adult resume. There's no objective. I mean, what's your objective? I want to get into college. No kidding. I mean, so,
like there is no objective, there's no education. You went to Ridge, you have transcript, there's a transcript. You're getting the transcript anyway. So no, we're really careful about showing them what that looks like and helping them not only to share what experience they've had, but also to talk about their experience in a more meaningful way. You can have an experience working at a local drugstore that is more impactful than an experience working on Wall Street. And the answer to how in the world can that be is that you might have a lot of responsibility in that local drugstore. You might open the store and close the store. They may have given you a key. They might really trust you. You might count the money at night. At Wall Street, they're like, I like my coffee to be on the left side of my desk when I come in, and it would be great if you could pick up my dry cleaning. And they're like, awesome, I've routed myself to all of the Starbucks and the dry cleaners in town, and that's the only skill I have learned at this internship. So it is really important to me when I work with my students and I really want to stress that I work with them in the post-secondary process. This is not just about college. The idea is when you build a resume, you build a resume. It's not that you build this is how I get into this particular school or those set of schools. It's the idea of how do I sell myself? What are my skill sets? How can I utilize what I already do and turn that into something productive in my future? When I write letters of recommendation, they are organic to that student. I don't start with another person's letter and fill in another person's name. It would be impossible for me to do that because every kid is different. Just because they were on the same lacrosse team or the same forensics team does not mean that they are the same kid. So what's important to me when a student writes their senior packet, for example, which we have them do during the end of their junior year, they talk about themselves, their parents talk about them. We also have our own experiences with them. That's what I draw from when I write a letter of recommendation. What has been important to them in their high school experience? If the answer to that is, I worked here or I did this because I thought I was supposed to, I'm not sure that my letter is the same letter as when a kid picks things and does things because it's organic to them. So this idea of be your genuine self, I'm not talking about talk about the fact that you went out on Friday. I'm talking about who are you as a person? What do you love to do? Why did you pick this club? I hope by the time it's senior year, it's not because every one of your friends does it. That's why you chose it freshman year. Let's be honest. They choose clubs freshman year because they go in a pack. And then all of a sudden, they never go again. And you're like, goodbye, whole pack of kids that were together. And then maybe one of them hangs on because they actually were the driver, the one who went there because this was their thing. And hopefully they stay for the full 4 years and they have a leadership position. And again, it's not because I'm using leadership as one of these key words that I want to put in quotation marks like this. It's because they actually do something. They're the kids you count on. I have kids that I count on where I literally trust that they're going to do exactly what it is that they said they're going to do. They're going to be where they said they're going to be. They are not necessarily my AP kids. They are the kids that I count on to do the right thing and to make the right choices when nobody is looking. And I don't worry about the fact that there is stuff out on my desk, and I don't worry about the fact that my purse isn't locked up, because they would never even, they would be the people who would be like, Stan, I really think you should put that away, because that might not be a good idea for you to leave that out. Those are the kids that are really impactful to me, not the ones that have 45 things on their resume, the ones that do it because they are that person. They're that person that you could describe in a letter by thematically talking about them. That this is what their life looks like, not that they've just chosen these experiences because they think they look good. So I think that's what Jen was talking about when she's talking about be your genuine self. Show who you are as a human being in your application. And the idea is that you're not done growing, right? So that human being might have been the person who chose all the wrong clubs freshman year. And you're like, yep, I was in that for a year because that wasn't me. But look what I am now and what I chose and what I'm spending a lot of time doing. That could even be that you work and that it's really important to you to work because you're saving up for a car or you're saving up for some other goal that you have or you love what it is that you do. I tell my students all the time that it is not that difficult for me to get up in the morning and come to work, which is amazing to me because I'm not a morning person. So the fact that I am here with bells on at 7-something in the morning, that is not really what I am as a person. I don't love getting up that early, but I really love working with them and I really love what I do. And my dream for every one of them is that they have that experience. I don't care where they went to school and how they get there, because maybe they will go to all these places and have all this student loan debt like I do and not even use what it is that they did when they were in school. But the bottom line is that it's more important to me that they actually come to work every day and are like, I am so glad to be here, because that to me is much more impactful.
And I just want to make sure that it's for all the counselors, not only you, right?
Oh no, it's just me, no. No, it's all
I think that the last person in has been here 8 years, so we've worked for a really long time together. Some of my colleagues are hiding places in the back, but no, it is not just me. And on the college side, just to give that perspective too, and Suzanne can mention this if she'd like, but I frequently say to 17-year-olds, I have been working for 20 years. Your resume should not be even close to the length mine is. And yet, I see them. I see resumes that are 3 pages long. That is not necessary. We talk a lot to students too about, it would be great if you do something outside of school. That something could be theater if that's what you love. Maybe it's a part-time job because you have to work for your family or because you are saving up for something. Maybe it's going home and watching your younger siblings because that's just part of your family responsibility. So whatever that something is, that we want to see. I think there's also this notion that, and I can't speak for every college and university, but we hear a lot too about like which activities should I be doing and what if I don't have a leadership position. You know what? NYU brings in a freshman class of just over 6,000 students. What would it be like if every single one of them had been super leaders in high school? Wow. What kind of environment would that be if then all of those people who were leaders in 20 clubs then came and all wanted to be like that? It just wouldn't work. And so, it's okay. It's okay if you just joined clubs or if you even just did one thing and you did that one thing throughout high school, but that's kind of what took up your time and what you were super interested in, that one sport or that one activity. So, and this is just what we talk to students about. Other colleges might say different things, but we want you to do something. Whatever that something is, it's up to you. It's not for us to dictate. If you hate community service, don't do community service. I don't know what else to tell you. Except for what is required at your high school. But if you don't go to a high school that requires it, no, it's fine.
We do have a student who I think has a question.
Hi.
I'd love to hear from you.
So, I don't see many students here, much less seniors here tonight. And maybe that's because they know what they're doing. But hi, I am a senior. My name is Jasmine and I go here. So I'm just listening to some of the parents and what they're talking about. I'm going to give you my personal experience real quick. Miss Rakefield is my friend's mom. Miss Cahill is the wife of my math teacher. They are amazing people, and everything you've asked tonight and that they've shared is true. Miss Cahill is not my guidance counselor, unfortunately, but I have a great one. Her name is Miss Wu, so if any of your kids have her, she's great. She's helped me write my resume. My resume is not very, very long. It's actually very short. I don't play a sport. I don't have a job. But when I go home, I have 2 younger siblings that I help take care of. I go home, I take care of my siblings. I might not be partying or doing a sport, but when the admission counselor speak about being genuinely yourself, that is being genuinely me. My college essay, if you wanted to know, was Disney princesses and how they impact me. That is why I would see myself a New Jersey Disney princess. That was my college essay. And I got into some great schools. The name brand one you would know about would be American University. And I'm going to Fairleigh Dickinson next year. I'm super proud of my decision. I am not an all AP honors student. I took 1 AP class in my entire high school career. That is AP psychology. Why? Because I really enjoyed the class and I plan on being a psych minor. In terms of clubs and stuff that I've done in high school, I've done a lot. Leadership-wise, I'm a project adventure leader. But it's because I genuinely enjoyed it and I loved working with the freshmen and getting to do what I do. As far as what I want to do, I plan on being a business admin major, and I started as just being an officer for entrepreneurship at Ridge Business Club. I am now the co-vice president of the club, and it's because I'm genuinely interested in it. If I wasn't interested in it, I would have dropped. All my friends joined other clubs like World Language or cooking or something else outside or Miles from Italy. Great clubs, but I wasn't interested in it. I joined something that I was genuinely interested and passionate about, and I don't have the highest GPA in my school. I'm not the smartest kid. I will be the first person to tell you that, but I'm super proud of what I accomplished at Ridge. Because it was me. It was what I wanted to do. I made it. I probably spent more time with my guidance counselor and my teachers than my peers. And for the parents that were concerned that school and peers do play a but at the same time, I'm not going to a name brand school. My friends are going to NYU, Yale, and Elana for my friend, but those are great schools, but I'm super happy with my decision because I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm helping my friends get to where they want to be. Yeah, they're going to like top schools, and my other guidance counselors know that just as well. Like, you can go to a top school, but if you're not happy there, you're not going to enjoy it. And so, yes, we all, like, my parents taught me to strive for success, and I am. I'm not going to Harvard or NYU or any of those others, and I love those schools, but, I mean, it wasn't what I needed to be doing. So, like, if your kids are interested in something, not to, like, tell you what to do, but let them pursue it, because if they drop it, they drop it. Like, I dropped 3 courses in my high school career, and I'm graduating. I'm going to a great school. I have what I want to do, and I have great connections out of it. And I'm starting Monday, and I'll be in an internship until June 14th. So,
Right, speaking of dropping, mic drop. We didn't even plan her, that was
Really didn't plan her.
You should apply to be a tour guide at Fairleigh Dickinson.
Because the irony about this is, so yeah, Jasmine is not one of my students. She happens to have my husband this year, but I actually asked my husband, who is that girl that has you that says hello to every person in the hallway? Because that is Jasmine. She is the girl, but when you see her during the day, she will brighten your day. She never looks like she's having a bad day, which is impossible because I'm sure she has them, but she will say hello to every person who walks by. She says hello to me by name. She doesn't pretend like she doesn't know me in the hallway. She is delightful to have around, and that's what I'm talking about. You want someone to be able to talk about your child, about like who they are, not whether, I have no idea how many AP classes that she took because I'm not her school counselor nor her teacher. But I do know what kind of a person she is because she emanates that when she walks around in the hallways.
And that's why her life will fall into place where it should be. Because she's happy and she feels like she's made the right decision for her authentic self. That's the key. That is the key.
With the college process, keep in mind that the most selective places do not mean that the fact that it's the most selective does not mean that it's the best quality either. There are a lot of quality places out there, and Fairleigh Dickinson is one of them that will teach you a lot and aren't as selective as the other places. And that's not saying that it's a bad school.
And I just want to say, like, you know, Jasmine is my daughter's friend, right? And I've never had the pleasure of having Jasmine as a student because we know I've avoided your grade. Like, when Jasmine would come in after school to talk to her teachers, I shared a room with her, my grade teacher, and I watched her come in to after school to talk to her teacher, and not once did I ever hear her ask a question about a grade. Can you tell me more about what we learned in class today? Or, you know, I was thinking about what we did in class today and how it connected to this or this. And she had these authentic, meaningful conversations with her teacher and all her teachers. And so when she asked her junior teachers to write a letter of recommendation, I'm sure that they had a laundry list of kids with 5.3 GPAs and with 17 leadership credits to their name. And Jasmine's letter got the most attention and the most personalization because Jasmine stood out. And some kids stand out because they're friggin' brilliant. And some kids stand out because they work so hard. And other kids stand out because they're so kind to their friends. And some kids stand out because they light up the room when they walk into it. So when we talk, so if you want your kid to go to a college that cares whether they took Mrs. Ritterford, that cares whether, oh, is she still here? No, she's not. Like, whether or not they got an A in a CP class or a B- in an honors class, you're feeding into the wrong conversation with your kid. What did you learn today? In what way did you grow and develop as a human being today? What colleges have programs that will allow you, the acorn that you are, to become whatever oak tree you were meant to be? Right? And all the counselors in the room are like Marguerite and have these conversations, and the teachers have these conversations. And a lot of times these kids in this community, I've lived here, I was this kid, I looked at my teachers and I said, what do you know? You're just a teacher. If you could have done anything, you wouldn't have been a teacher. And so I think if we all recognize that we're on the same team and we all have the same goal, and that's to live in a society
with great human beings and who will take care of us in our old age. We might want to make sure that we're talking about those eulogy virtues and not those resume virtues, because we really don't want them dialing it in when they're taking care of us.
Jasmine, I'll hire you, by the way, if you also.
Question over here.
So this question is for the college admissions individuals. It may be somewhat naive, but if your child decides to take a different path, and the chaos and the hectic and the stress of having to do all these things senior year, junior year, and decide to take a breath and take a year just to gather thoughts, because our life expectancies aren't 39 years old, they're 82, whatever the age is. So there's a lot of time. We have to rush out there and get a job and get into all the rat race. But as a college recruiter, what's your level of expectation for a student that delays a year? I mean, is it the type of work they do? Is it, should they continue taking classes, take careers in it? I mean, should they take all their ACTs and SATs the junior, senior year, because that's when it's fresh in their mind? So any talking, I'm sure this is somewhat of a naive question, there may be a lot of information out there. You can talk about a little bit about what your level of expectation when you see that different applications come through the door, such as someone who could be your own.
So Rutgers has a lot of non-traditional students, so I'll start there. We have a huge transfer population, as we've heard from the other, lots of people at this table. But one of the things that I tell students generally is that as you're going through the process, it is easier to do this application process if you have some ideas while you're still in school, because you have the support of your guidance offices, your transcripts and stuff like that. So if you go off and travel for a year or do something else for a year, it's a little harder to track everybody down and get those letters of recommendation and things that you might need. So if you have a student who's saying, I want to take a year off, but I know where I want to go, then it's probably best to go through the process and ask for a deferral. And most schools, we all take deferrals, we just put their check into the next class, which is awesome. So you got another kid in the class already. So, but as far as students taking time off, not really sure what they're doing, I can name so many things, that admissions people would love to see. Now, the person who asked about the resume for Rutgers, I will tell you, Rutgers application, which a lot of your students will be filling out. I looked at the numbers, and this year's class, over half applied to Rutgers. Just put it out there. And I will tell you the number of students who are coming in a little bit. But the Rutgers application is actually really easy in some ways. We don't ask for a resume. We do ask for some list of activities, but it's very limited. We ask for an essay, but it's not, there's no supplemental essays, it's just one. And we actually don't even ask for transcripts or letters of recommendation. So on top of all of it, we're really looking at just the core stuff, the academic stuff. The transcript's done by a self-reported academic record, so it's a slightly different process. We do look at grades. So for the resume piece of it, it's a very, very minor piece of the process for admission for us. It can become more important for academic scholarships at that end. But for admission, in Rutgers, if you look at the profile and you fit the numbers, we're accepting about 56 to 60% of the students who apply. So I'm just putting that out there. And it's a really good place. Now, it's not that 56 or 60% of the class at Rich could get in, I'll just say that. But there are some criteria. But as far as students who defer, you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, similar, really. We recognize that some students want to do other things for a year before they go to college. Like Suzanne said, I agree that if they have kind of a plan in mind of where they want to go, or the fact that they even just ultimately want to end up in college in a year, I absolutely agree that it is easier to do it physically when you are here in high school. It can be hard to be traveling in a remote area of the world and trying to, get back in touch with your school counselor to stamp transcripts and things like that. But we see it all the time. We grant deferrals all the time. We say to students, the only thing that you really can't do during a gap year is matriculate at another institution.
You can't go someplace else.
Right, you can't go somewhere else. You can't be like, I'm just gonna hold my spot at NYU while I try out Northeastern for a change, and then that's really the only thing you can't do. But if you want to travel, if you need to work, whatever the case may be, if you want to do an internship, that's fine with us.
Another example of a non-traditional path. I worked in Res Life at one of the schools that I worked at, and I had a staff of 8 RAs. My best RA that I had was a person who was in the Navy. He was a male nursing student who had been in the medical corps in the Navy, and the Navy was paying his way through the University of Rochester to get his nursing degree. And then he ended up in a pharmaceutical company making buka bucks. So he came non-traditional, and he was 22, and he was the best RA I had because he was 22, and the freshmen, yeah, he was a really good person. But you know, you can come different directions. We have a huge military presence too. I mean, that's another option for students.
Just to piggyback on their answers, because I think that a lot of what you pointed out was sort of the positive things that people do sometimes because they're taking a year off or 2 years off. There are also students who take those years because something's going on for them, like life is difficult or they've made some poor choices. The nice thing about the college process, and there being schools that do read letters of recommendation and do read like personal stories, and I'm not saying that Rutgers will never do that because they do accept phone calls and they do allow school counselors to share with them information that we might want to share. But that being said, first of all, we are the type of a high school where if a student takes a couple years off and needs something, we haven't gone anywhere. I mean, I told you that the last one was here for 8 years, so like we've been here a long time. And luckily I'm really not that old. But the bottom line is that we're probably going to be here for a lot longer. And so if your student takes a couple years off or goes someplace and is like, this isn't for me, like I need some help, I need to figure out where I need to be, we're here. If they need to reach out and they need to say, like, what do we do now? We have answers for the what do we do now. I think that the important part about taking that time off and what do you say about that is that your story has to make sense. The time that you took off and what you did has to seem like it made sense chronologically. If it's that you could have had a drug problem, you could have had a really terrible situation of life, you could have been ill, a family member could have been ill. Life happens, and this idea that like, well that can't happen if you're going to go to such and such a school, like that's not necessarily true. I can't tell you how many times I now do campus visits where schools are talking about those things. There are dorms. I just did a visit not too long ago at University of New Hampshire. There are dorms for students who are in recovery. Life happens, and sometimes it's really important to be honest about it and to say, this was my story, this was my path, this is why I am more resilient now than I was a couple of years ago. And I think that being willing to share those stories and be, you know, that organic person of like, this is what happened to me and now I'm ready to choose the next path and to do the right thing is extremely important. And I think that, you know, giving students and you know, young people that idea of being like, just because you didn't do that right out of the gate does not mean that you can't do that now. So I think that's really important.
And another piece of this, you don't have to screw up. If your kid is not ready to go to college, don't send them. You're just going to waste your money. And parents really have this feeling that if my student doesn't start right away or have some sort of plan to start, that they're never going to go. And the statistics and studies that have shown that students who take some time off to do a PG or do something else, whatever it might be, and then land in college, and this is very common in Europe, but land in college, stay at a much higher rate than the students who go off initially and say, this is not for me. And then you're out $70,000. So there's nothing wrong with waiting, letting your kid wait.
In 1 year.
Yeah. Not at Rutgers, 28.
So in the interest of time, it is 8:30. So as a wrap up for this evening, I do want to read my favorite part of this book, and I hope and encourage you all to read. The Counselor in Me loves a piece of this book, which is a letter that parents wrote to their senior student who was actually at a school in New Jersey, a competitive school that remains unnamed in the book, but the pressure was enormous. And this is the letter that they decided to write, which I think captures a lot of the messaging that we've heard tonight. And so I'll go ahead and read this for you all. Dear son, on the night before you receive your first college response, we wanted to let you know that we cannot be any prouder of who you are today. Whether or not you get accepted does not determine how proud we are of everything you have already accomplished and the wonderful person that you will become. That will not change based on what admissions officers have decided about your future. We will celebrate whatever joy you have and wherever you get accepted. And the happier that you are with those responses, the happier that we will be. But your worth as a person, a student, and our son is not diminished or influenced in the least by what these colleges have decided. If it does not go your way, you'll take a different route to get where you want. There is no single college in the country that would not be lucky to have you, and you are capable of succeeding at any one of them. We love you all the way around the world and back again into wherever it is that you are headed. So with that, I thank you so much to our panelists for providing. And I thank you too for coming and having a courageous dialogue, especially in our community.
Thank you.